thought I had buried the past. I thought my mistakes were behind me. But when Vanessa stormed into my office with undeniable proof of my affair, my entire world collapsed in front of everyone. My husband found out. My career was destroyed. And Ethan, the man I risked everything for, he vanished until he came back with a chilling warning. What happens when the woman you betrayed isn't finished ruining you? Before we dive into this shocking story, subscribe for more gripping tales and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. When Vanessa stormed into my office, I knew. My entire world was about to shatter. The way she moved, deliberate, predatory, sent ice crawling down my spine. Every footstep echoed against the marble floors, and when she finally stopped in front of my desk, she didn't say a word at first. She just stood there, her piercing blue eyes scanning me like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. Then, with a slow, calculated movement, she dropped a thick folder onto my desk. The papers inside fanned out, revealing pictures of me. Of me and Ethan. Of things no one should have seen. I couldn't breathe. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Vanessa's voice was quiet, but each word sliced through me like a blade. The office, once bustling, had fallen into a dead silence. I could feel my coworkers' eyes on us, whispers barely concealed. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What could I say? That I was sorry? That I never meant for it to happen? The truth was, I didn't have an excuse. And she wasn't here for apologies. She was here to destroy me. It hadn't started like this. When I first met Ethan Sinclair, I had been nothing more than a dedicated marketing executive trying to climb the ranks in a cutthroat company. My husband, Daniel, was the safe, predictable type. Reliable, steady, but distant. He loved me, I knew that, but our marriage had settled into a monotonous routine. Work, dinner, sleep, repeat. Ethan was different. The first time he called me into his office for a private meeting, I was nervous. He had a reputation, charming, ruthless, and incredibly powerful, but he had also taken an interest in me, praising my work, pushing me forward when others overlooked me. "I see potential in you, Olivia," he had said, leaning back in his leather chair, eyes flicking over me in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. But potential means nothing if you don't fight for what you want. I wanted to believe it was just admiration at first, the way he lingered when he spoke to me, the casual touches, a hand on my lower back, a lingering glance. But the air between us grew heavier with each passing day, an unspoken tension neither of us addressed. The first time we kissed, it wasn't planned. It happened late at night after a client dinner. We had both had too much wine, the city lights blurring outside the tinted windows of his car. When his lips brushed mine, I didn't pull away. When his hands tangled in my hair, I let him. I told myself it was a mistake, but the next time, it wasn't. Ethan knew exactly what he was doing. His seduction wasn't rushed. It was slow, methodical, like he was unraveling me piece by piece. We would steal moments in his office, pressed against the locked door, our breaths heavy with the weight of what we were doing. I told myself I was in control, that I could stop any time, but I didn't. It became an addiction, the thrill of secrecy, the way his hands knew exactly where to touch, the fire in his eyes when he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. I didn't think about the consequences until Vanessa. She leaned over my desk, her manicured nails tapping against the damning evidence between us. "You thought you were special, didn't you?" she murmured, tilting her head. "That you were different from the others." Others. The word landed like a slap. Ethan had sworn I was the only one, that what we had was real. But as I stared into Vanessa's cold, knowing eyes, I realized I wasn't the first, and I certainly wouldn't be the last. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor pulled my attention. I turned and my stomach dropped. Daniel was standing at the entrance of my office, his face unreadable. He knew. Vanessa must have told him. Or maybe he had already suspected. The signs had been there, late nights at work, the sudden shift in my behavior, the way I avoided his touch. But knowing and seeing are two very different things. Daniel, I choked out, pushing my chair back as if I could somehow erase the evidence between us. He didn't speak, he just stared, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The hurt in his eyes was unbearable. Ethan walked in then, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "Vanessa, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Vanessa turned to him with a smirk. "Cleaning up your mess, darling." I had never seen Ethan afraid. Not in board meetings, not in negotiations, not even when clients threatened to pull million-dollar contracts. But now, he looked terrified. Vanessa reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. "I've already sent everything to the board." Ethan stiffened. "You'll be lucky if you have a career after this." She smiled sweetly. "And don't worry, I made sure Olivia's name was included in all the reports. HR will be handling her termination by the end of the day." The room spun. Fired. Exposed. Ruined. I felt sick. Ethan's jaw clenched, but Vanessa wasn't done. "Oh, and Daniel?" She turned to my husband, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I have an excellent divorce attorney if you need one." Daniel flinched like she had struck him. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. I wanted to chase after him, to beg him to listen, to tell him that despite everything, I never stopped loving him. But how could I? Vanessa picked up her bag, giving me one last glance. "Enjoy your new life, Olivia," she said softly, almost pityingly. "I hope it was worth it." And with that, she was gone. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven. "Olivia, we can fix this." I laughed. The sound was hollow, bitter. "Fix this?" I whispered. "Ethan, you're finished, and so am I." He reached for me, but I stepped back. For the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the powerful, untouchable man I had fallen for, but as someone weak. Someone who used people and discarded them when they were no longer convenient. Just like he had discarded Vanessa. Just like he would have discarded me. I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. There was no coming back from this. The first time Ethan and I crossed the line, it felt inevitable. It wasn't an impulsive mistake, not really. It was a slow burn, something that had been building between us for months, igniting in moments of stolen glances and the way his fingers would linger just a second too long when he handed me a file. It was the late-night meetings, the knowing smirks, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, like I was something special. It happened in his office, long after everyone had gone home. The city lights cast a soft glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the air was thick with something electric. I remember the way he leaned against his desk, his tie slightly loosened, sleeves rolled up, watching me with that unreadable gaze. I should have left the moment I felt the shift, the change in the atmosphere, but I didn't. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like?" he asked, voice low, smooth. I swallowed. What would be like?" Ethan smirked, like he knew I understood exactly what he meant. And I did, because I had thought about it, countless times, in fact. I had imagined what it would feel like to have his hands on me, his lips against mine. So when he stepped closer, when his fingers brushed against my wrist, when his breath fanned against my skin, I didn't pull away. And then his lips were on mine, and I was lost. It wasn't gentle, wasn't hesitant. It was raw, desperate, like we had been holding back for too long. My back hit the desk, papers scattering everywhere, but I didn't care. His hands were in my hair at my waist, pulling me closer, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. We didn't stop that night. Once wasn't. The affair became something we couldn't control, something we didn't even try to. Every stolen moment was an addiction. Every time we touched, it fed a hunger that only grew stronger. The secrecy, the risk, it made it even more intoxicating. There were late nights in his office, my legs wrapped around him as he murmured against my skin. There were rushed encounters in empty conference rooms, his fingers gripping my hips as I bit down on my lip to keep from crying out. There were afternoons in expensive hotels, the scent of his cologne lingering on my skin, long after I returned home to Daniel. Daniel. I told myself I still loved him, that what Ethan and I had was separate, different, that my marriage wasn't falling apart, it was just missing something. Something I had found in Ethan. But the lies started piling up. I told Daniel I had late meetings when I was really tangled in Ethan's sheets. I told him I was exhausted when I was really worn out from the intensity of what I had done hours before. I told him I loved him when I wasn't sure if I even deserved to say those words anymore. Mia, my best friend, started noticing the changes. "You've been distracted," she said one evening as we sipped wine at a rooftop bar. "And don't tell me it's work. Something's different." I forced a laugh. "I just stressed, work's been crazy." She narrowed her eyes. "Right, work. And not, say, Ethan Sinclair?" My grip tightened around my glass. "What?" Mia sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "I'm not an idiot, Liv. I've seen the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him." I felt my pulse quicken. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" She arched a brow. "'Cause the way you just reacted tells me I'm not." I exhaled sharply. "Mia, please." "I'm not here to judge," she interrupted. Be careful. Men like him, they don't leave their wives, and even if they do, it never ends well." I wanted to believe she was wrong, that Ethan was different, that what we had wasn't just some temporary indulgence. But then there were the moments that made me doubt. The way he would silence his phone when I was with him. The way he never spoke about Vanessa, his wife, as if saying her name might shatter the illusion of what we were. The way he made me feel like I was his entire world when we were alone, but as soon as we stepped back into the office, I was just another employee. Still, I ignored the warning signs. Until the night everything almost fell apart. Ethan had booked a suite at a high-end hotel downtown. The city skyline stretched before us as I stood by the window, wrapped in nothing but the sheets from the bed we had just destroyed. He was behind me, his hands tracing lazy circles on my bare back. "Come away with me this weekend," he murmured. I turned to face him. "What?" "Let's get out of the city, just the two of us, somewhere no one will know us." The idea was tempting, but it was also reckless. I hesitated. He kissed me, silencing my protest, and I melted into him. That was when his phone rang. He ignored it at first, but when it rang again, he cursed under his breath. "Vanessa." I recognized her name on the screen instantly. For the first time, reality crashed into me. This wasn't just a fantasy. This wasn't just passion and secrecy. This was betrayal. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's not stupid. She knows something's up." I swallowed hard. "Ethan, what if this is a mistake?" His jaw tightened. "You're not a mistake." But as I lay awake that night, long after he had drifted off beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the escape I had thought it was. Maybe I had walked straight into a disaster waiting to happen. I should have known it would all come crashing down. Affairs like this don't stay hidden forever. Lies have a way of unraveling, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but destruction. And I was about to learn that the hard way. The morning it all fell apart started like any other. I was sitting at my desk, sipping coffee, trying to focus on the emails piling up in my inbox, but my mind was elsewhere. On Ethan, on the things he had whispered to me the night before, on the way he had traced lazy circles on my bare skin after we had... I barely noticed Vanessa when she walked into the office. She wasn't the kind of woman you could easily overlook, tall, elegant, with an effortless grace that made heads turn, but she moved with such quiet determination that by the time I realized she was there, it was too late. The office fell silent. Conversations halted. Phones were picked up, only to be set back down. Vanessa's heels clicked against the tile as she strode straight toward me. A thick folder landed on my desk with a sharp slap, sending a jolt through me. "Let's not pretend you don't know why I'm here," she said, voice calm, controlled, too controlled. I stared at the folder, my breath catching. I didn't dare touch it, but I could already imagine what was inside. Photos, screenshots, maybe even receipts from the hotels. "Open it," Vanessa said softly. I didn't move. I couldn't. A cold smile curved her lips. "Fine, let me help you." She reached forward and flipped the folder open. And there it was, me with Ethan, outside the hotel last weekend, his hand on my lower back, my lips just inches from his. Another picture, his car parked outside my apartment late at night, a screenshot of a text. "Ethan, I can't stop thinking about last night, counting the hours until I see you again." My heart pounded in my chest, the blood roaring in my ears. The whispers started immediately. "Oh my God, he's sleeping with him." I knew it. I knew something was going on between them. I could feel the judgment, the curiosity, the shock rolling through the office like a tidal wave. Vanessa leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You thought you were discreet, didn't you? You thought no one would notice." She chuckled, shaking her head. "You have no idea how many people were waiting for you to slip up." I finally found my voice. "Vanessa, Don't," she snapped, eyes flashing. "Don't insult me by pretending you're sorry. You're only sorry you got caught." I swallowed hard. But then another voice joined the conversation. "Vanessa, what the hell are you doing?" "Ethan." He had just walked in, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw the scene unfolding before him. Vanessa turned to face him, tilting her head slightly. "Oh, good. I was wondering when you'd show up." He looked at the folder, then at me, his jaw tightening. "This isn't the place." "No, Ethan. This is exactly the place," Vanessa cut in. "You humiliated me. You think I'm going to protect you from the consequences?" He ran a hand through his hair, glancing around at the staring faces, the murmuring colleagues, the way everyone was eating up the drama like it was their morning entertainment. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was already trying to figure out how to spin this. I had spent months being intoxicated by his power, by his ability to control every room he walked into. But in that moment, I saw him for what he really was. A man scrambling to save himself. Vanessa wasn't done. She reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. "I've already sent everything to the board. The emails, the surveillance footage, the hotel receipt." Ethan stiffened. "You what? You didn't think I'd just expose you to Olivia, did you?" Vanessa smirked. "I made sure the company knows everything. Your little after-hours rendezvous, the way you used your position to carry out your affair. I didn't..." "Save it," she snapped. You're not talking your way out of this one. Ethan's face hardened. He looked at me then, and for a split second I thought I saw regret. But then something else replaced it. Indifference. Like he had already accepted the fallout and was ready to move on, to distance himself from me. I felt sick. This was the man I had risked everything for. And now, when it all came crashing down, he wasn't going to fight for me. Vanessa, Ethan tried again, his voice lower, more controlled. We don't have to do this here. Vanessa's lips curled. Oh, but I want to. And then, the final blow. She turned to the entrance of the office, where a figure had just walked in. Daniel, my stomach dropped. No. He wasn't supposed to find out this way. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, God, his eyes, they were filled with something I had never seen before. Not just hurt, disgust. He glanced at the folder, at the images of me wrapped around another man. His lips parted slightly, as if he was trying to speak but couldn't. My legs felt weak. I wanted to move, to run to him, to explain. But what could I possibly say? Vanessa folded her arms, watching me with quiet satisfaction. Daniel, I thought you deserved to see this for yourself. Daniel's throat worked as he tried to swallow. How long? His voice was barely a whisper, but it hit me harder than if he had screamed. How long, Olivia? His voice cracked. I wanted to lie. I wanted to soften the blow, but there was no softening this. 6 months, I admitted. His breath left him in a shudder. Jesus. He looked at Ethan then, and for a moment I thought he was going to hit him, but he didn't. Instead, he turned back to me, his face unreadable. I hope it was worth it. Then he walked away. Just like that. No screaming, no scene. Just quiet devastation. And that was so much worse. I tried to go after him, but Vanessa blocked my path. Let him go, she said coolly. You've done enough damage. I looked at her, at the quiet triumph in her eyes, and I realized this wasn't just about revenge for her. This was about power. She had won. Ethan was finished. And me? I had lost everything. I ran after Daniel, my heels clicking against the polished office floors, but he didn't stop. He moved with purpose, his shoulders tense, his fists clenched at his sides. Daniel, please, I called, my voice breaking. He pushed open the glass doors of the building, stepping out into the crisp air. I reached for his arm, but he yanked away as if my touch burned him. He turned to face me then, and the look in his eyes shattered whatever was left of me. Don't, he said, voice low, raw. Don't you dare. Tears blurred my vision. I need to explain. Daniel let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Explain? Olivia, I just saw everything. What could you possibly say that would make this any better? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. There was no justification, no excuse. I had done this. I had betrayed him. He took a step closer, his face inches from mine, his voice quiet but lethal. Was he worth it? The question sent a sharp pang through my chest. Daniel, it wasn't about... Just answer the damn question. He cut me off. Was he worth throwing everything away? I swallowed, my lips trembling. I didn't know how to answer. Daniel studied me for a long moment, then exhaled, shaking his head again. You know what? It doesn't even matter. His voice cracked slightly, and that broke me more than anything. I didn't mean to hurt you, I whispered. He gave me a hollow smile. But you did. A car pulled up to the curb and he turned toward it. I realized then he had planned this. Vanessa must have told him everything before she showed up at the office. He was leaving. Daniel, please don't walk away from me, I pleaded. His grip tightened on the handle of the car door. "I already did, Olivia. A long time ago." And with that, he got in and drove away. I stood there, shaking, watching the taillights disappear down the street. My entire world had just collapsed, and I had no one to blame but myself. A slow clap behind me made my blood run cold. Vanessa. I turned to see her standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, satisfaction written all over her face. "Well," she said, tilting her head, "that was even better than I expected." My jaw clenched. "You planned this. You set me up." She arched a brow. "Oh, honey, don't flatter yourself. You set yourself up the moment you decided to sleep with my husband." I let out a shaky breath. "Vanessa?" "Let me guess." She took a step forward. "You want to apologize. You want to tell me you didn't mean for any of this to happen, that it just happened." I stayed silent. She laughed, shaking her head. "That's the thing about people like you and Ethan. You think you're untouchable. You think you're smarter than everyone else, but guess what? You're not. And now you have nothing." Her words stung because they were true. She glanced back toward the building, then back at me. "Oh, and in case you were holding on to any delusions about keeping your job, you might want to start packing your things. HR is handling your termination as we speak." The ground beneath me felt unsteady. "You really want to ruin my entire life, don't you?" Vanessa's lips curled. "You ruined it yourself." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, broken, with nothing left but regret. I had lost Daniel, I had lost my job, and as I looked up toward the office windows, I realized something else. Ethan hadn't come after me. He had watched everything unfold and done nothing. That was when it finally hit me. I had been nothing more than a mistake he wasn't willing to clean up. The silence in my apartment was deafening. Daniel was gone, his side of the closet empty, his favorite coffee mug missing from the counter. The absence of him was louder than any argument we could have had. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at my phone. I had called him twice, left one voicemail, no response. He wasn't coming back. Work was gone too. My email had been locked before I even made it back to the office that afternoon. A meeting with HR had been scheduled, but it wasn't a meeting at all. It was a formality. They handed me a severance check and a non-disclosure agreement. Ethan had been terminated as well, though his punishment would never match mine. He was wealthy, connected. He would land on his feet. I wouldn't. I had built my entire career around that company. And now, my name was dirt in the industry. No one would touch me. Ethan hadn't called. I checked my phone obsessively, even when I told myself I wouldn't, even when I knew it didn't matter. He was silent. Not a single text. Not even a half-hearted attempt at damage control. That silence spoke volumes. I wasn't important to him. Maybe I never had been. I didn't know why that realization hurt so much. Maybe because I had convinced myself I had meant something to him, that what we had shared was more than just a fleeting indulgence, that I hadn't risked everything for nothing. But I had. Mia showed up 3 days later, letting herself in with the spare key I had given her years ago. "Jesus, Liv," she muttered as she stepped inside, wrinkling her nose at the mess. "You look like hell." I didn't argue. She walked into my kitchen, opening cabinets before sighing and pulling out a bottle of wine. "You've eaten, right?" I just stared at her. She cursed under her breath, rummaging through my fridge before finally settling on ordering takeout. Mia had always been the blunt type, never one to sugarcoat things, but when she sat across from me at the table, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she sighed. "I want to be mad at you." I swallowed hard. "You should be." She nodded. "Yeah, I should." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "I warned you," she said after a pause. I warned you, Olivia. I closed my eyes. I know. Did you think he was going to leave her for you? No, I admitted softly. I don't think I ever did. Mia leaned back in her chair, studying me. So what now? I let out a humorless laugh. Now? Now I start over. If I even can. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You will. I didn't know if I believed her, but I wanted to. 2 weeks later, I saw Ethan again. I was at a cafe, sipping the coffee that I couldn't afford anymore, scrolling through job listings that I knew were dead ends. Then I heard his voice. I looked up, and there he was, sitting just a few tables away, talking to a man in a suit. He looked fine, more than fine, unbothered. I wondered if he had lost a single night of sleep over any of this. His eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. Recognition flashed. Then, just as quickly, he looked away. No acknowledgement, no guilt, no regret. Like I was nothing. And maybe I was. I had destroyed my life for him, and he had already moved on. That was when I knew. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was just done. I finished my coffee, gathered my things, walked out of that cafe without looking back. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to free. A year later, I barely recognized the woman I used to be. Everything had changed. My job, my home, my outlook on life. I had left the city, moving to a quieter town where no one knew me, where I wasn't that woman who had been caught in a scandal. It had taken months to rebuild, to find work in an industry that had turned its back on me. The job I had now wasn't glamorous, nothing like my old corporate position, but it was steady. It gave me enough to live, enough to start over. And that was all I needed. I had spent so much time grieving my old life, the loss of Daniel, the betrayal of Ethan, the humiliation of losing everything in the most public way possible. But grief only held power over you if you let it. So I let it go. Some days were harder than others. There were mornings I still reached for my phone, instinctively expecting a text from Daniel, a call from Ethan, before remembering that those men were ghosts now, shadows of a past I no longer belonged to. Daniel had moved on. I had seen the pictures. Mia had sent them to me once, not out of cruelty, but because she thought I should know. He had met someone new, a woman who looked kind, safe. She wasn't me, and that was a good thing. She wouldn't hurt him the way I had. I hoped she made him happy. I really did. I had spent too much time trying to justify what I did, trying to make sense of it. But the truth was simple. I had made a choice. A selfish, reckless choice. And I had paid the price. One afternoon, I found myself back in the city for the first time since I left. It wasn't intentional. A work errand had brought me here, a client meeting that I had tried to push onto someone else, but in the end I had to face it. I walked through familiar streets, past the buildings that once felt like home, the coffee shop I used to frequent, the office building where I had lost everything. I didn't belong here anymore, but I wasn't afraid of it either. Then, just as I was about to leave, I saw her, Vanessa. She was sitting at an outdoor table at an upscale cafe, sipping a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone with a satisfied, content expression. She looked up. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she smirked. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Instead, I gave her the smallest nod, the kind of acknowledgement that didn't require words. And then I walked away. No guilt, no regret, just forward. Because that's the only direction left to go. The past had a way of creeping back in when you least expected it. I had moved on. Or at least I told myself I had. A new city, a new job, a new life. I had learned how to breathe again, how to exist without the weight of my mistakes pressing down on me. There were still moments of regret, flashes of the past that surfaced late at night when everything was quiet, but for the most part, I had left it all behind. Then, one evening, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, and I had made a habit of avoiding anything that reminded me of my old life, but something in me hesitated, and before I could stop myself, I pressed accept. A voice I never expected to hear again filled my ears. Olivia. My breath hitched. It was Ethan. I should have hung up. I should have deleted the number and moved on, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, gripping the phone, listening to the one voice I had sworn I would never let back into my life. "It's been a while," he said, his tone smoother than it should have been, like this was just another conversation between two old friends. Like he hadn't been the reason I lost everything. "What do you want, Ethan?" My voice was steady, colder than I felt. A pause. "I need to see you." I laughed, a bitter sound. "Are you serious?" "Please," he said, and for the first time there was something raw in his voice, something desperate. I should have said no, but I didn't. Curiosity, old wounds, and maybe a part of me that still craved closure won out. We met at a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the city, far from where anyone who knew us might see. I spotted him immediately. He hadn't changed much, still effortlessly polished, still exuding the same quiet arrogance that had once drawn me in. But there was something different in his eyes, something almost broken. "You look good," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. I didn't respond. I just folded my arms and waited. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I screwed up." I raised an eyebrow. "That's an understatement." He smirked, but it was weak, forced. "I lost everything, Olivia." I tilted my head. "You mean we lost everything because of you?" He nodded, accepting the hit. "Vanessa took it all. My career, my reputation. She made sure I wouldn't set foot in that industry again." "He warned you," I reminded him. "You didn't listen." His jaw tightened. "Yeah, I didn't." Silence stretched between us. I should have felt satisfaction in seeing him like this, stripped of his power, of his control. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked again. His eyes flickered. "I need your help." I let out a short laugh. "You're out of your mind." "I know," he admitted, leaning forward. "But I don't." I shook my head, trying to make sense of whatever game he was playing. "What could you possibly need from me?" His expression turned serious. "Vanessa isn't done with me." I frowned. "She already took everything." Ethan hesitated, then said, "Not everything." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. "She wants more," he continued, "and she's not above playing dirty to get it." I let out a slow breath. "What are you talking about?" Ethan looked around, as if making sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. "She's setting me up, Liv, framing me for something big, fraud, maybe worse." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "You're telling me Vanessa, the woman you lied to, cheated on, and humiliated, is now framing you? For what? Revenge?" He nodded. "She's making sure I never recover." I scoffed. "Can you blame her?" His expression hardened. "I deserve a lot of things, but not this." I shook my head. "Ethan, I don't care. Whatever mess you got yourself into, it's your mess, not mine." His hand shot out, grabbing mine. "You're the only person who understands what she's capable of." I pulled my hand away. "No, I was just collateral damage. Just like you." He swallowed. "You don't get it. If she takes me down, she might take you with me." That sent a chill through me. "What do you mean?" I mean, she's been digging into everything. Everything, he emphasized. You think she just stopped after exposing us? She's been watching, waiting. A knot formed in my stomach. You're lying. He shook his head. I wish I was. I didn't want to believe him, I didn't. But Vanessa had always been ruthless, and I had been naive to think she would just let things end after humiliating us. Why should I help you? I asked finally. Ethan exhaled. Because if we don't stop her, we both go down. I stared at him, my pulse pounding. I had spent so much time trying to move forward, to escape the wreckage we had created, and now he was telling me it wasn't over. That it might never be. I stood abruptly. I can't do this. Ethan grabbed my wrist, his grip tight but not forceful. Olivia, please. I wrenched my arm free, stepping back. I shouldn't have come here. I turned and walked out of the bar, my breath coming fast, my hands shaking. Maybe he was lying. Maybe he was manipulating me the way he always had. But what if he wasn't? What if Vanessa really was still watching? I didn't want to look over my shoulder for the rest of my life, but I had a sinking feeling that I might have to. 2 days later, I received an envelope in the mail. There was no return address, no explanation, just a single photograph, a picture of me. From the night I met Ethan at the bar, I stared at it, my blood running cold. Vanessa wasn't done with us, and I had just walked straight into her game.